Good afternoon. Thank you for joining Found with Love. Today I'm here with my co-host Regina, and we have something like a celebrity with us today. We have Miss Brittney Sessoms. She told me she's the young Medea, right? We are here today to talk about something I think that all of us probably never thought about, but heard of, or are experiencing. In my degree program with Memphis Theological Seminary, I am going through a program called Land, Food, and Faith Formation. It's looking at the intersection of land, food, and faith, asking us to, are we really exhibiting or treating the land, the food we grow, the food we eat, the way that God created it to be done? Or have we strayed away from that? So today we're going to bring us some topics, right? But first, I'm going to let you talk to Brittney, how to introduce herself because she is some like a star, you know, from just my little research, right? She's been in Memphis Voyager, Canvas and Rebel magazine, worked with Black Clergy Collaborative of Memphis, Memphis Urban League, Young Professionals, numerous social institutions. So she out there. People know her. They respect her when they see her comments. You know what I'm saying? So I'm just happy she graced our presence was found with love. I met her actually at while in class with Memphis Theological Seminary. So she came and she taught a class to us and kind of introduced us to some of the things that we covered within the program. And while she was there, I was like, I got to get you on the podcast, right? I want you to come so we can spread this word to everybody. Because when you hear what she's going to talk about, you're going to realize that living here in Memphis, we are truly impacted by this thing. But sometimes we don't talk about it because we don't know. So we are all about spreading knowledge and spreading love to the people of God. So Brittney, can you tell us who you are and what you do, basically?
Absolutely. Well, spoiler, I'm not a celebrity at all. At all. I am Brittney Sessoms, the youngest big mom or muddy that you will ever meet at the corner of Charlotte and Pickens. So it's just a fancy way to say I'm an old school granny baby, raised by country folk. And the Charlotte and Pickens actually is the streets that they raised me on. Charlotte Road being in Walker Homes and Pickens Road being in Tipton County, both where they grew, made, sold, canned, and all those different what I like to call technologies. So one was the backyard garden in Walker Home, and then Tipton County, Pickens Road was the large farm that was inherited to my family on my father's side from my fourth generation father, who died a prosperous farmer before the end of slavery.
Mm-hmm. And what we want to start to talk this conversation, because I'm gonna ask her to come back again. We won't be able to get to everything today, but we do want to introduce some terms to you so you can know what to look for. The first one is food insecurity. That's something you probably never heard of or never thought about. But I want to ask Brittney to really define what is food insecurity and what does it look like in Memphis today.
So, conceptually defined, food insecurity is where and it mainly impacts low income or vulnerable communities. So, it is where they don't have enough fresh, affordable food to meet their basic life need. And when typically that happens inside of what they call a food desert, which is where those residents don't have access to that same culturally relevant, fresh, affordable food and that is nutrient dense, but also where they don't live within 1 mile to 10 miles of a grocer. Then there's some more layers under there. You got food swamps, which in those same neighborhoods they have access to a lot of unhealthy food by way of convenience stores, fast foods, corner stores, Hunt's Brothers Pizza, and things like that. But then there's another coin under there that specifically names this as an intentional result of policy, which it is food apartheid, coined by Karen Washington in 2018. I'm sorry. And she describes it as deserts are natural phenomena, right? They naturally occur. It's a God thing. But specifically food apartheid and the result in low income neighborhoods of hungry people, chronic illness, and things like that is absolutely a result of things like redlining. So if you've never heard of redlining, it's like where people have said, "Hey, we're not going to loan in this area," which marks this area as hazardous. And so back then, grocers, which is one of the things that Memphis is quote unquote known for. If you didn't know, we had the Piggly Wiggly, we had People's Grocery, and things like that. It signaled to those grocers not to build
Yeah. Redlining, is something, I hate to say this, but I didn't get introduced to it until I started going to college. I didn't hear about redlining in high school, how from the early days in the States where they looked at where the black people live, or people of color live, and they redline all those areas to not invest in those particular areas. If you look back at the maps of Memphis or look back at the maps of Birmingham, Alabama, places like that, you'll see even today, those initial maps they drew are still the communities they don't develop in. They don't send anything in. And when I got into the program, I started looking at a systematic way they would take grocery stores out of certain communities, but backfill them with the little cheap food with the corner stores, things of that nature. Or liquor stores. You can ride up and down the stores in Memphis. You'll find a liquor store almost at every corner, but you will not see a grocery store anywhere. Or you'll see them selling their food inside the convenience stores, the gas stations. We have been overran by fast food, and we don't have the access, should I say, to the foods that we need that are nutrient dense, as you said. How can we become healthy if all we're eating are fried foods? Are we eating are the pizzas from the corner stores? Or not only are we not don't have access, we don't have the money to afford the healthy foods. We believe that food is cheap. That's what they want us to believe. If we can't get the chicken on sale for $5 for a whole chicken, it's too much. Not realizing that chicken has been subsidized. That's the reason why it's that price. The true price of the chicken may be $12 for that chicken. But because we live in a society that we see the cheap price and when something go up, we think, oh, it's too high. It's only getting back to the price it should be. I was reading this book by I can't think of her name. It'll come to me. Ayers, Miss Ayers. We call her Miss Ayers, right? She said we are in the time that instead of raising animals, we are growing animals.
Yes.
Say it again. Instead of raising animals, we are growing animals. What do you mean by that? Today, they are growing chickens in a cage. The chickens never touch the ground. They never walk around. But we are going to the stores. We are buying this chicken that go from being hatched to being slaughtered within 40 days. So they are pumping them full of chemicals. They're pumping them full of antibiotics. Even the stuff we take for depression, they are given to these chickens to keep them in these cages eating, 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 eating. That's why when you see the chicken, as you drive them down the highway, sometimes you see those trucks that is full of chickens and stuff, and they just look all dirty, right? Because they haven't left that cage since they was hatched. But that's the food we want. We want cheap food. We want it right now. And when you live in these food deserts, that's what is missing. Because they marginalize the people of low income and they marginalize the people of color, not just black people, but any people of color. You got your Hispanics, you got your American Indians that was here. You got all these people that are in these communities where they can't afford this food. And they can't afford it and they don't have access to it.
How important is it for us in the communities to pay attention to this limited supply of fresh fruits, fresh vegetables, and meats?
Well, I would say it's extremely important. I'm going to piggyback on your first question and answer that in part with Regina's. But in Memphis, particularly, almost every black urban brown neighborhood is a food desert. There's pretty much not a major grocer within 1 to 10 miles. And then we have the transportation issue in Memphis, which creates a larger barrier for access, right? And so I would say it's absolutely important for us to pay attention to it because to what Mr. LaShawn just said, believe it or not, in food desert, the markup is higher on things like bread, milk, and things like that. Because you're getting it from the corner store, and they know you don't have a way to get to a major store where it's going to be probably within market value, right? They're marking that up at least 5% more.
Yes.
And so I would say the main reason we need to pay attention, for me personally, if you go a little bit deeper, and I think we may have discussed a little bit of this in your class, but environmental health.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you think of people who cannot build or invest in a red line area, but they can build industrial plants, right? So XAI, just as an example. Well, that starts to then eat at the physical health, right? So you have food swamps, which are now creating your chronic illnesses, where we have the Vita dialysis on every corner, right? So you've got diabetes, you've got high blood pressure, hypertension, various cardiac issues, right? Usually are diet related. Mm-hmm. So in tandem with food insecurity, there's also nutrition insecurity.
Right.
And so for me, just bringing that all together and tying it back to environmental, where you've got lead infested homes, you've got gas turbines polluting the air. This now overloads your liver and your kidney, which are your two main organs for detoxifying or getting rid of toxins in your body. And so when you look at the EPA, no amount of lead is safe, right? And so it doesn't leave your body. So you think about the youth and the crime we're seeing now, not just chronic illness, but now mental illness.
Yes.
And then nutrition plays into, how you're able to function and perform and produce. And so for me, knowing that those things are specifically impacting our communities and our people at disproportionate rates, including cancer, by the way, because I think it's number one in Memphis because of the environmental toxins. Getting back to the land is going to be paramount. You know what I mean? And when I think of the land, I'm thinking of backyard growing, land ownership and growing, but also that bartering system that we used to have. If I'm not growing this, my neighbor is growing this, so we can trade off. But I think that as a community, we absolutely have to take it very seriously.
So we look at that, the fact that the food you just shared, how harmful it is to our physical bodies. What is the starting point? You just talked about what can I do on a small level? What can I do at my home to help with this?
Mm-hmm. So, of course, backyard growing, but specifically in low-income neighborhoods, a lot of these people are not homeowners, which is another thing that is kind of tied to land access. Because if you have land, you can build a house. You know what I mean? And so a lot of those people are off-put because they're like, well, I can't afford this. I don't have anything to grow in. Well, you can just get a bucket. And in a 5-gallon bucket, you can grow at least 3 tomato plants. In another bucket, you can grow some potatoes. You know what I mean? And it's deep enough and you'll be able to harvest something. You can grow some beans. You can get fed that way. And so at home, you have your backyard. You can still grow in pots and raised beds or whatever there. But things that are going to be very giving, that are very easy to grow, that are not too much maintenance, and that are very giving. Tomatoes. You think of one tomato and how many seeds are in one tomato. And each seed can give you a tomato plant, which is going to then give you at least 30 to 50 more tomatoes. Do you see how you begin to knock out the middleman, which is the store?
Yes.
And then you start seed saving, right? I don't need to buy tomatoes anymore. You start seed saving. One pepper gives you over 50 pepper seeds. And so I think getting back to that is how we can begin to save ourselves from ourselves, if you will, because there's also food addiction in there. When you look at fried foods, you look at caloric dense food, right? So not nutrient dense, but it's high in calories. Usually going to spike your sugar and bring you down. Mm-hmm. Those things are addictive. You know what I mean? So in terms of like growing, also make sure you eat it. So it's kind of there has to be this like reacquainting with the land, and I like to say the earth and the fullness thereof. But I do think that we have to prepare ourselves for the withdrawal because we have become so accustomed to
the fast food.
But I encourage people to absolutely grow, drop a seed. You know what I mean? If you have property, if you have a bucket, I think Dollar General, Dollar Tree even sells bags of soil now. So drop some seeds.
Drop the seed and meet a need.
Yes.
Gina rhyming on us.
Yes.
Go ahead, drop a seed and meet a need.
Yeah.
I know when you came to the school that day, we actually visited a was it a market?
We did.
Okay, so tell us about the market. How can we visit them? How can we partner with them? Just let us know what the farmers market looks like.
So to give you a little back history, like I said, I'm a old school, raised by old folk church baby, and so I specifically remember kind of always being in love with the land. I remember the first time I saw a plant sprout, I was like in love with it, and then I looked at church. We were always eating fellowship hall. We were always feeding one another. Somebody was always cooking something. Food was really a way that was central to who we were as a community, right?
Yes.
So Sunday mornings, somebody was either cooking already, and I would watch the logistics of how it happened. Like we were leaving out of the house, but the hour stay on low. And by the time we get out of church, all the church members come over.
Yes.
Somebody's house and it's done. And then we follow past on to the next church, you know. And then at their church, they got some in their kitchen. So as I was paying attention, I came across in this current day and time the Black Clergy Collaborative of Memphis, who is specifically interested in civic engagement, economic advancement, and things like that by Black clergy. So it's kind of like reclaiming the Black church as a social institution that it has always been, where people in our communities, when they are in need, when they are vulnerable, that's the first place they know they can go. And so in that, the church was also one of the first places that we could own together, right? And as Black people, usually coming from these vulnerable populations, it was very important to me, as I guess being the next generation, of how we continue this incubator. So the Black Clergy Collaborative is very invested in food justice as well as economic justice. And for Black people, land and growing food and selling a commodity or market has always been our way. But with the lack of land access, you remove a lot of that. And so this market is the Black Farmers Market Memphis in partnership with a historic Black church, Pilgrim Rest. So it's on the parking lot of Pilgrim Rest Church inside of a food desert. And so the market is on their parking lot, and I think there is not a major grocer probably in over more than 10 miles. Maybe the Aldi that just got on Union is a little bit closer, but knowing that and knowing that the church is a central location, we partner with them to house the Black Farmers Market. And so there's artisans, local growers, makers, all of that. And we bring that to the neighborhood, knowing some of the other barriers they face. Yeah.
Because I know, when you think biblically, you think about what God says, bring all stuff into the storehouse so there will be meat, right? The tithes in your offerings. So tying this back to the church, that was the church was actually there for in the Old Testament. But I think today we're gotten away from it. Let me rephrase. I don't think we have. The majority of churches have gotten away from that for whatever reason. Whether they don't have the land, whether they put parking lots all over the place. But for the ones who do have access to land, having some type of vegetable being grown on your property can not only support that Sunday meal with the church, that fellowship hall where they're cooking at, but the local communities. So I think that's one way we can give back if we as churches begin to utilize that land we just got sitting there. Nothing on that we keep knocking down weeds or cutting it down. Why not place something out, some tomato plants out there, some hardy vegetables? They're gonna support the community. We also talked about in the class that we have we are now living in a society where we give help, but we don't teach them how to overcome that. We're seeing the same people week after week, month after month, but they don't have the means to address it. So how can we get to the point where we are addressing the need versus just supplying?
Changing that consumer mentality of those that are coming.
That leads me to Black food systems. And so, and I say Black food systems, but food systems as a whole looks at the production, the processing, the purchasing, and then the consumption, right? So you got this four system. But most importantly, a food system, as far as local food system, especially black and in the black church, it is working in tandem with nature. So recognizing that God has blessed us with this abundance of the land, but also this duty to steward it, right? And this duty to grow some of their harvest for the needy. So that's one thing that the farmers don't really hone in on, or the growers don't really hone in on. But the food system, as far as food sovereignty, really looks at that, and it prioritizes the local need over the big profit. So it's saying God has blessed us with land, seeds, water, and all these natural resources, and we're going to mimic God as best as we can, right? To provide for ourselves, but we're also going to provide for our brother and our sister. And so, inside of this food system, there's somebody who is going to prep the soil, there's someone who's going to grow, there's someone who's going to harvest, there's someone who's going to process and clean and chop and package, there's someone who's going to take it to market and ship and things like that. And then there's the person who's going to consume. And so I personally believe that that's the model we have to get back to. And a lot of people don't realize within faith-based systems, remember I said that was one of the first places for Black people that we organized and we were able to own. And believe it or not, a lot of legislators right now follow that model. They would most prefer to invest in a faith-based organization. And so as people, I think it is absolutely our duty to be in relationship with the church so that we can create this system for ourselves again. And, just remember that you got to grow some for your brother, for your sister who is more vulnerable.
Yeah, just thinking about that, I was thinking about even the story. You look at Ruth and Boaz, right? That back then they didn't even what they said they glean. They didn't go all the way to the edge of this stuff. Because God specifically told them, you don't glean to the edges. You leave a certain amount out there for the people who are less fortunate, who can't afford or don't have. Those are the rules. Those are kingdom rules, but we don't follow them today. We have become with monocropping, one crop on the whole place. What was also stood out to me in Miss Ayers' book, Jennifer Ayers' book, is called Good Earth, Good Food, Good Earth. And when we looked at the amount of corn, just say corn, all of us eat corn, right? America they make 1/3 of all the corn produced in the world, right in the United States. But out of that millions of pounds, or billions of pounds, should I say, per year, we only use 20% of it. The other 80% go to additives for your gasoline for your car. Right? And the other part of it go to feeding the animals, the chickens we talked about when we first came in. So we only using 20% of what we actually grow here in the United States. The rest of it is for feeding animals so we can eat, or to be an additive to our gasoline. But can we take that to make sure that every community has food? I think it's something we as the faith community must tackle. We must utilize the land that we have. Yes, those flowers are pretty, but can we feed some hungry with that little spot of land that you got? We got to make sure that we are doing things from a Bible perspective, right? It's great to have a real nice church and a real big parking lot. But if you can take 150 yards of that parking lot and turn it into a community, little small place where they can put something in the ground. But what the Bible say, when the earth remains, there's always going to be three things, right? Seed, time, and harvest. So if we know that, and we can say that in a time that we have a need as the church, we need to be addressing the needs of the people we serve. It's depressing sometimes that the people you are speaking to in churches, we don't even know that they don't have food to eat. But we got to get more involved. We really got to know the communities which we are servicing, not just from coming to the church and paying tithes and offerings, but are you there actually in the communities with them on the ground? Are you addressing their needs? Are you bringing them in to see what they need, what's hampering them today? Because I tell you, food, I never think about food. We always had. But this class made me really start to think about, what am I doing? And another important thing I saw, not important but fascinating, we throw away more food than we eat. Actually, we throw away more food than we actually eat. So
Question, Brittany. What are some practical ways that our listening audience can do, some practical things or steps we can take that will have a impact on food insecurity?
I would say partner with your local growers. Shop at your local farmers markets. Get to know your farmers. Make the grocery store your second option. You know, you'll find that they are real Easter eggs. God gave us red, blue, and pink. They not dyed. They are real. But most important to building that relationship, People's Grocery specifically was over in was called the Curve in Mississippi and Walker. It was owned by black men and it was community owned. So had about I think 11 maybe or so community owners, but there was a certain relationship that you went up to the counter and you said, "Well, I want this much. I want it. Can you weigh this for me? I want this much beans. That would get it for you, weigh it for you." And there's this relationship rather than they come to, build a grocery store and it's like, "Oh, I'm just going down the aisles and this is a, me experience." But getting back in the face of community. And then, of course, the owners of People's Grocery were killed. They were claimed to be trying to start a war, but I mean, I think from my research that they absolutely were killed because this was a black incubator. From Arkansas, from Memphis, people would come. They know they can come here get fresh food. They know the people who are checking them out, which they know where it's sourced from, where it's grown from, and so that community, I guess I would call it a model, is what's going to be very important for us. So absolutely building relationships with your farmers and your growers. And then if you can, growing and start just handing stuff down, the neighbor, everybody love a summer tomato, that's,
Yes.
a little salt on it, grow and just
Little salt.
salt on a little bit.
I told you she was something like a muddy, right?
Everybody loves tomato with salt on it. So you start passing down, building relationships, talking to people about food. Food is high.
Mhm.
Believe it or not, at the grocery store, people are struggling. You get 5 little things, and you like, I done already spent $100. Produce is already decomposing. So I would say definitely those things. But then most importantly, you said food waste, which brings me to another point. So, your little vegetable scraps, save them. Your eggshells, save them, compost them. God takes that dead matter and creates new life, in that food chain. And so you might not compost, but then you build a relationship with that farmer. You go take your bag of compost to them so that they can keep growing and feeding their soil. And even in your church, you might say, "Well, growing food, we need volunteers. It's a lot for our church, or having a market is too much." But you can use your church's kitchen for commercial processing, and you can shop with farmers for the food for the fellowship hall particular Sunday, and you can give out some of those things to the unhoused or the hungry. So there's always a little part, or you might not want to do any of that, but I can assure you we need help. You might know how to make a good flyer and post it on social media.
Right.
You might know how to spread the word and say, "Look, I know a farmer who sells this. You can get this. I know somebody who got chickens. You can get eggs. I know somebody who they not shooting up their chickens. They So there's even a little bit, that I think we all can play. And even if you don't want to grow or do any of that, you might be the one that just go in the kitchen, spray the vegetables off, and put them in a bag. Put them in the freezer.
Nothing wrong with that.
There's every part in the food system, right? There's a part. So it starts to build a relationship and getting to know the people of where your food comes from.
So it's that time for us to take a quick break. We'll be right back after these short messages from one of our providers. back to our conversation about food insecurity with Brittney Sessoms. While we was out, we did receive a question for the audience. Regina, I'd like to share that question with us.
Yes, the question is, what is your view on food sold in dollar stores? Does the store serve as a sub for grocery stores?
It's the same thing. It's a food swamp. If you go into the dollar store, Dollar General, or Dollar Tree, or Family Dollar, you are absolutely going to find a lot of overly processed, caloric dense food, and not at all anything nutrient dense. In fact, I don't think I've seen one fruit or vegetable in any of those. Only boxed foods, packaged goods, sodas, and things like that. So I'm absolutely against them. Um, you know, processed food is a grade 1 carcinogen, which means it creates carcinomas, which is cancers. And so I absolutely do not recommend it, but it is often one of the closest things that people can get inside of their bodies because they are on every corner where people can access in walking distance, which is not something they can do for a full major grocer.
Why is it that we have so many of these resources that we can go and purchase these unhealthy foods?
Well, a lot of the zoning laws, believe it or not, in our neighborhoods or in these low income, vulnerable areas, the zoning, like, it's very unfortunate, but you would think, like, oh, I could get that building right there and I would turn it into, a gathering place and we could have a farm and I could have a market, but it's not zoned for that. A lot of times it's zoned for things like strip clubs and liquor stores, which is why we see so many. And so again, that redlining and the zoning has a lot to do with it. That's why food apartheid, food swamps are a direct result of that, policy and laws we were talking about earlier.
And one thing I got introduced to here, which I never paid attention to, was the Farm Bill. And before I joined this program, I never even knew what the Farm Bill was. Never heard of it. And even just the mention of it seems like it's strictly about farming, right? When people don't understand that the Farm Bill is where the SNAP benefits come from, things we used to call food stamps, that's the Farm Bill. Also, the WIC is the Farm Bill. So when we elect politicians who want to cut the Farm Bill, we don't realize as a community they're cutting the benefits some of these communities are surviving upon. So we have to make sure that we evangelize this. That's the word we use. That you need to understand what the Farm Bill is. It's not something we can unpack in one sitting. It'll take a long time for you to really look at all 12 facets or 12 tenets of the Farm Bill. But that's something they're voting on right now for the passage. Just looking back at the 2018 bill, that gave $75 billion per year to SNAP. So if they cut that down for all the people that's receiving those benefits in this next iteration of it, it's going to be less and less. We're going to find more people going to be out there dealing with food insecurity or starving, things of that nature. We as a community have to find a way to help. How can we help? So with that being said, I know we are up against time today, but what are some of the things you think we can do today? Whether it's a church, whether it's your community, yourself, what can we do to not only help ourselves but help our neighbors? You went into earlier to really lessen the impact of food insecurity.
It's interesting you asked that question. I'm very grateful for it because in this, people who care about food insecurity, you'll find the food banks, you'll find churches handing out boxes, and you'll find something that leads back to what you said. You have the same people every week, and that just doesn't really eradicate the issue to me. So me, myself, learning, that's how Charlotte and Pickens came to be. It's like, well, the technologies are ancient. Now, nobody knows how to grow. Nobody knows how to can. And you just talked about the Farm Bill. Not only is it SNAP and WIC, but it's SNAP education, so that people can learn how to, cook with these things, how to make, nutrient dense meals. Because believe it or not, a lot of the food stamps in your low income or vulnerable areas, what do they have access to? They're buying caloric dense, high processed food. They're not buying the fresh, affordable food that they have access to, which is why they still have the chronic illness, even though they technically have access to food. And so, what I've done, or what we do at Charlotte and Pickens, was host a series of classes, workshops, skill building things, hoping to soon get into a building. But If you teach a man to fish, you won't have to.
There you go.
You know what I'm saying? So,
Absolutely.
specifically the skills that I learned from my grandmothers and just being around them, growing food, cooking food, even making clothes. Because when you think about agriculture, it is not just food. It's we were known for growing cotton here. That's clothing.
Yes.
We built the industrial industry. Think mattresses and curtains. And so if you start just bringing all of that into purview as it relates to agriculture, now you get into the economic relief. And so, and that just can go from anywhere. You can begin to make hair oils. Come on, Madam T.J. Walker. And so people begin to not only be less dependent on food and food stamps, but also have economic relief because they're adding value to the skills they know, which is how to grow, how to cook. And they're able to, you can be a chef, you can whatever you want to do. But my answer to this is to render forth the skill.
Jennifer Ayers' Good Food, the book I mentioned earlier, she also says something I thought was very striking when we talk about the things that we eat animals. But there's a take that we as society, we look at non-human things as disposable than animals. But she gave a comparison I think that really stood out to me. You can't kick your dog or Peter gonna get you.
That's right.
Somebody gonna take you to jail, right? But if you have a cow that you're growing to be consumed, or a chicken you're growing to be consumed, you can treat those animals any way you want to. There's no law that governs that. So we get in trouble for kicking our what they call companion pet. But if you're feeding these animals, go back to say there's a study of their chicken feathers revealed antidepressants, caffeine, antibiotics, and hormone pills in their feathers. So if that's in their feathers, it's in the flesh that we're eating, and we'll wonder why we're suffering with all these diseases that we can't seem to get away with because we're feeding ourselves with it every day. We're sticking that chicken. Not only is unhealthy, then we fry it. We triple batter it. Now everything is high. Cholesterol is high. Blood pressure is high. We got diabetes. But that's the food that we're facing in these communities by removing the grocery stores. It's systematic. It's not just in your neighborhood. But then even I learned there was seven levels to different stores. I won't call out the name right now, but there's like an A store, a B store, and a C store. In the C store, we get all the produce and the meat getting ready to expire. And guess what neighborhoods those C stores are located in? They're not located in affluent neighborhoods. They are the A stores. When you walk into the store, you can see they got 4 or 5 rows of produce. It just looks so great. You go to the one in the smaller community, they got a corner. Bruised, battered. Like, why does fruit look so bad? Because your store is classified as a C store. Everything getting ready to expire. Everything that's getting ready to go bad goes to the C store, those communities. So it's that system that we live in that we got to find a way to break down. Yes. And it's going to start by everyone getting involved. Us, the local churches, you know who you're electing or placing in office because they continue to change it to benefit the people with the money. And the people's without, we continue to take it. But we can't say this need doesn't exist. We can't say there's nothing like food insecurity. We can't say there's nothing like food apartheid or food swamps. They exist. Some of us are living in them right now, but didn't know those classifications, didn't know what it meant. We just knew the store was too far away. Instead of driving way over there, I'm just gonna go right here. I'm gonna grab the stuff from the corner. All I need is 2 tomatoes. Sure, they $5 a piece, but I don't feel like driving 10 miles away to get 2 tomatoes. And that's what we get stuck in today. So, if you could have a moment just to tell everyone what they should do, how they can locate you, what would be the thing that you would tell them they can do today, right now, as they're watching you? What can prick their heart to want to change?
I would say ask God to unharden your heart when it comes to the land. Because a group that I didn't mention, the seniors, are one of our most food insecure groups. And when you look at that group, that's who holds the knowledge. But they also hold the trauma. right? Shelling the peas on the porch with the purple sore hands and the baling dragging the 9-foot bag of cotton. They see this as very laborious without a lot of return. You know what I mean? And so we got to honor that experience, right? And so I would just say invite yourself to unlearn and relearn. You know what I mean? To take a step back, reintroduce yourself, and just recognize that this was here. Number one, just remembering that we were brought here for this, and we cultivated this land by way of tobacco, sugarcane, sorghum, and all of these different things, and made America the richest land of the world. And so, while it may seem, because that inaccessibility, a lot of struggle and strife came with cultivating land. But I'm just inviting us all to kind of shift our thinking. You know what I mean, and redevelop the relationship with the land. Go out, ground yourself, take your shoes off in your grass, and just breathe, pray. Take your Bible, have devotion, get you a little blanket, sit it down. Let the rain fall on your head a little bit. Sometimes we don't want the rain to get on us. We forget that those things are acts of God. God said, "You plant a seed, I send you the rain." And so it all works in tandem. So that's number one. Us as our culture, we need to reacquaint ourselves, with how God shows up in our lives, especially by way of the garden. And then slowly start to grow. You know what I mean? You don't have to do too much, but slowly start to grow. Get in touch with your local farmers, shop at your farmers markets, cook. And if you struggling with any of that, of course, you can call me. Hopefully, if I can take you on a field trip, you can see chickens and kind of, help yourself remember. Because a lot of the people, when they come to the market and they taste a tomato from the farmer versus the market, you can just see them travel back, into time. Like, oh, I ain't tasted a tomato like that in so long. And they'll say, well, we used to raise all this stuff. We used to do all this stuff. It was hard work. And so that's going to take a lot of undoing, right? And it's going to take some help. And so I'm here to help because I'm just somebody who's always loved it. But I sit in the middle of generations who absolutely hate it, and those of us who absolutely, like say, we need to learn and we want to learn. And so I think it's going to it's going to take us coming together. And I think that in this, we're going to transform our communities again to what they used to be. So, Charlotte and Pickens, you can find me on all social media at Charlotte and Pickens, TikTok, Instagram. I'm not usually active on there because I'm in the community working. But the best way is directly on the website, which is www.charlotteandpickens.com, exactly how it sounds. And you can email me, bsessoms at Charlotte and Pickens, and I'm here. We hope to be ramping up classes and conversations and workshops and dinners on the land and all of that soon. And yeah.
Great, great, great. Well, thank you, my dear, for joining us.
Thank you.
I'd like to leave with this thought. When I was thinking about food insecurity, I thought about John 21:15 through 17. It reads as this: When they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? He said to him, Yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Jesus said to him, Feed my lambs. A second time he said to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? He said to him, Yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Jesus said to him, Tend my sheep. He said to him the third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter felt hurt because he said to him the third time, Do you love me? And he said to him, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. Jesus said to him, Feed my sheep. You may be thinking, well, how did that tie into food insecurity? The first time he told him to feed his lambs, the young people. See, there's a difference between a lamb and the sheep. The lambs are the young ones. The sheep are the ones who grew up. So then he told them to tend my sheep. We got to take care of the people around us. Then he also said, feed my sheep. So not only are we responsible to feed the young, we're responsible to feed the older generation to ensure they have what they need. These are the words of the person we say saved us. So we need to get back to honoring what Christ said. Now, we need to feed the sheep. We need to tend the sheep. And we can't forget about the little ones. We got to feed the lambs, making sure every child has food to eat every day. So, with that being said, thank you for joining us today. We're going to have Miss Brittney come back with us again. We're going to get deeper into this thing called food insecurity. So, until then, be blessed and be found with love.
Welcome to the official website of Lashon Fuqua, where Christian inspiration, revelation, and spiritual discernment intersect. Discover truly inspiring books, exclusive previews, and behind-the-scenes insights from the author. Whether you're a believer who has recently accepted your calling or a believer seeking to grow closer to God, learn how to dismiss spiritual acne, the feeling of always chasing yet never experiencing the love and presence of God. Join the community, explore upcoming releases, and subscribe to receive the latest news and exclusive offers. Your next inspiring read is just a click away. Visit www.lashonfuquaauthor.com and be inspired by dream revelation and a passion for studying the Word of God.